The V-280 Valor's twin rotors beat against the afternoon sky as Captain Sarah Mitchell pushed the medical Tiltrotor through its final approach to Metro General Hospital. In the cabin behind her, 7-year-old Marcus Thompson lay strapped to a gurney, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate breaths. The playground accident had seemed routine until the internal bleeding started. What began as a simple broken arm had become a race against time. "Control, this is MedFlight 772, requesting immediate landing clearance," Sarah transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "MedFlight 772, you are cleared for the controller's voice. Cut off abruptly and negative on the landing clearance. We have an obstruction on the helipad." Sarah's blood ran cold. Through the cockpit windscreen, she could see Metro General's rooftop helipad clearly now, and sitting dead center like a silver middle finger to emergency medicine was a pristine Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan. "Control, confirm obstruction. I'm seeing a vehicle on the pad." "Affirmative, 772, security is en route to locate the owner. Divert to Presbyterian Hospital, 15 miles northeast." Behind her, flight medic Tony Rodriguez's voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. "Sarah, his pressures dropping fast, pulse is thready. We don't have 15 miles. Sarah banked the aircraft in a tight circle around the hospital, buying herself time to think. The Mercedes gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its hazard lights blinking lazily as if its owner had simply stepped out for coffee. She keyed her radio. "Control, patient is critical. What's the ETA on removing that vehicle?" "Unknown, 772. We can't locate the owner. Hospital security is checking the building. His oxygen saturation is at 82%. Dr. Lisa Chen called from the back, her hands working frantically over Marcus's small form. "Sarah, we need to get him to an OR now." The boy's mother, Maria Thompson, sat rigid in her jump seat, her face a mask of terror barely held together by the thin thread of hope that her son would survive. She'd watched her boy fall from the monkey bars, watched him laugh it off, watched him suddenly collapse an hour later as his spleen began to rupture. Now she watched the numbers on the monitors drop with each second they remained airborne. Sarah made another pass around the helipad, her tactical mind analyzing the situation. The Mercedes was parked almost perfectly in the center of the pad. Maximizing the obstruction, this wasn't accidental, this was deliberate. Selfish entitlement at its most dangerous. "Control, I need the owner of that vehicle located immediately. I have a pediatric emergency bleeding out up here. It's trying set. Hospital administration is making announcements. Please divert to Presbyterian." Sarah's voice took on an edge of steel. "Flight time to Presbyterian is 12 minutes. Patient doesn't have 12 minutes. She could see people gathering on the hospital's lower roof deck, staff and visitors pointing up at her circling aircraft. Among them, a woman in designer clothes was gesticulating wildly, apparently upset about something. Sarah squinted through the rotor wash and windscreen glare. The woman was blonde, well-dressed, and holding what appeared to be a designer purse. She was also standing next to the roof access door, arguing with 2 security guards who kept pointing. At the helipad above, "Control, I think I see your vehicle owner." Blonde woman, designer outfit, southeast corner of the roof deck. She's arguing with security. "Copy, 772. Security is advising her to move her vehicle now." Sarah watched through her binoculars as one of the security guards spoke into his radio, then pointed directly up at her aircraft. The blonde woman's reaction was immediate and telling. She threw her hands up, shook her head violently, and turned away from the guards. "Control, she's refusing to move it." "Say again, 772, the owner is refusing to move her vehicle. My patient is dying up here, and she won't move her car." The silence on the radio stretched for 5 seconds that felt like an eternity. Finally, 772, you are directed to divert to Presbyterian Hospital immediately. We cannot force. Sarah cut off the transmission and switched to the hospital's internal frequency. "Dr. Martinez, this is Captain Mitchell. I need you in the administrator's office right now." Dr. Roberto Martinez, Metro General's Chief of Emergency Medicine, came on the line immediately. "Sarah, what's the situation?" "I've got Marcus Thompson up here, bleeding internally. 7 years old, ruptured spleen. Vitals are crashing. Some entitled piece of work has parked her Mercedes on our helipad and is refusing to move it." I need that car gone in the next 2 minutes, or this kid dies. Jesus Christ, I'm heading to admin now. Who is it? Blonde woman, designer everything, currently on your roof deck, arguing with security. She knows exactly what she's doing. I'll handle it. Sarah brought the Valor around for another pass, descending to 200 feet. The Mercedes hadn't moved. Through the cabin window, she could see Maria Thompson's lips moving in silent prayer, her hand clutching a small wooden cross. Sarah, Tony called out, his heart rate's all over the place. We're losing him. She keyed the radio again. Control, this is Medflight 772, declaring a medical emergency. I am going to attempt a landing on the helipad in 60 seconds. Clear the area. -772. You are not cleared to land. The obstruction is still in place. Control, I have a 7-year-old boy dying in my aircraft. That woman's convenient shopping trip does not supersede his right to live. Clear the area. Sarah could see the security. Guards on the roof deck had multiplied. At least 6 officers were now surrounding the blonde woman. But she stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head defiantly. One guard held up his phone, apparently showing her something, probably a video of Marcus being loaded into the aircraft. Control, what's the status on vehicle removal? Owner is still refusing. 772. She's claiming she has a right to park there and threatening to sue the hospital. Sarah felt a cold fury settle over her. In 12 years of flying medical helicopters, she'd seen plenty of human stupidity. But this was something else entirely. This was malicious negligence wrapped in designer clothes and legal threats. Control, patch me through to hospital administration. Now, 772, this is Administrator Johnson. Mr. Johnson, this is Captain Mitchell. I've got Marcus Thompson up here dying, while your VIP parking princess plays legal games with my landing pad. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to have that car moved in the next 30 seconds, or I'm going to land on it. Captain, you can't watch me. I've got a dying child, a grieving mother, and about 15 seconds of patience left. That Mercedes is about to become very expensive scrap metal. Through her headset, she could hear the administrator shouting orders, his voice fading as he apparently ran toward the roof access. On the roof deck below, the scene had become more animated. Dr. Martinez had arrived and was pointing up at her aircraft while gesturing emphatically at the blonde woman. Sarah, Dr. Chen's voice was tight with controlled desperation. His blood pressure is 70/40. We're losing him fast. Marcus's mother looked up at Sarah through the cabin window, her eyes pleading. No words were necessary. Mother's worst nightmare was playing out in real time, and the only thing standing between her son and the operating room was one person's stunning selfishness. Sarah brought the Valor down to 100 feet, the rotor wash now powerful enough to rattle the windows of the hospital below. The Mercedes rocked slightly in the artificial hurricane, but remained stubbornly in place. Control, final warning. I'm coming down. 772, you are not authorized. Sarah switched off the radio and looked back at Tony and Dr. Chen. Strap everything down. We're landing on the car, Tony asked. Next to it, close enough to make a point, she brought the nose around and began her descent. The massive twin rotors now creating a deafening thunder that echoed off the hospital's facade. At 50 feet, she could see the blonde woman clearly through the windscreen. The woman was looking up now, her expression a mixture of defiance and dawning realization. At 30 feet, pieces of debris began flying around the helipad, loose medical equipment, papers, anything not secured. The Mercedes alarm began blaring, audible even over the rotor noise. At 20 feet, Sarah could see the woman's face change. The defiance cracked, replaced by something approaching fear. She began backing toward the roof access door. But the security guards blocked her path, apparently under orders to keep her there to witness the consequences of her actions. At 10 feet, Sarah executed a perfect hover, the Valor's landing gear just touching the helipad surface. The Mercedes was now completely engulfed in the rotor wash, rocking violently from side to side. Its alarm wailed continuously, and Sarah could see small dents forming in its pristine paint job from flying debris. She keyed the intercom. Everyone ready back there? Go! Go, go! Dr. Chen shouted. Sarah brought the aircraft down with surgical precision, the right main landing gear touching down exactly 18 inches from the Mercedes' front bumper. The left gear settled on the opposite side of the helipad's center line. She'd effectively caged the car between her aircraft and the helipad's edge, making it impossible to move without risking collision with the Valor's roto. 3 hours later, Sarah Mitchell sat in the Metro General cafeteria, her flight suit still bearing the sweat stains and adrenaline residue of 2 back-to-back emergency calls. The highway accident had been brutal. 3 teenagers who'd learned, too late, that physics doesn't care about teenage invincibility. 2 were stable now, the 3rd would never walk again. But they were alive, which was more than could be said if she'd wasted those extra 12 minutes flying to Presbyterian. Captain Mitchell, Sarah looked up from her untouched coffee to see a woman in an expensive business suit standing beside her table. Mid-50s, silver hair perfectly styled, carrying herself with the kind of authority that came from years of getting her way through intimidation and money. "I'm Victoria Whitmore," the woman said, extending a manicured hand, Karen's mother. Sarah didn't take the offered hand. "Mrs. Whitmore," Victoria's smile faltered slightly, but she pressed. "Aunt, may I sit? I think we need to talk." "About what?" "About dropping the charges against my daughter." Victoria settled into the chair across from Sarah without waiting for permission. "I understand there was a misunderstanding today." Sarah's expression didn't change. "A misunderstanding. Karen made a mistake. She's young," she panicked. She didn't fully understand the situation. Victoria leaned forward, her voice taking on a practiced tone of maternal concern mixed with veiled threat. "But surely we can resolve this without destroying her future over one moment of poor judgment." "Poor judgment." Sarah repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. "Your daughter blocked an emergency helipad for 47 minutes, while a 7-year-old boy was bleeding to death. She didn't know, she knew." Sarah's voice cut through Victoria's protest like a blade. She saw the signs, she heard the announcements, she watched security guards point at my aircraft and explain the situation. She chose to refuse. That wasn't panic. "Mrs. Whitmore, that was a calculated decision, that your daughter's convenience was more important than a child's life." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Captain Mitchell, you seem to be under the impression that you're dealing with ordinary people. The Whitmore family has donated over $2 million to this hospital. My husband sits on 3 corporate boards and has significant influence in this city. And smart people understand that sometimes accommodation must be made for those who support the community." Victoria's smile returned, predatory now. "Karen works in VIP services, specifically because she understands how to handle delicate situations involving important people. Today was simply a case of competing priorities." Sarah stared at the woman across from her, processing the complete absence of any acknowledgement that a child had nearly died. "And I'm here to offer you a way to make this situation beneficial for everyone." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside, it's a cashier's check for $50,000. "Consider it compensation for any inconvenience, along with our appreciation for your ... creative ... handling of the landing." Sarah looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "You're trying to bribe me." "I'm trying to resolve a situation that got out of hand." "Karen will apologize, of course. We'll make a donation to the hospital's pediatric wing in the boy's name. Everyone wins. Except Marcus Thompson, who almost died because your daughter values her shopping more than human life." Victoria's patience was wearing thin. "Captain Mitchell, let me be very clear. My family has significant resources and influence. This can go one of 2 ways. We can resolve this quietly and generously, or we can make this very difficult for you. Your actions today were reckless and could have resulted in serious injury or death. Landing a helicopter on an occupied helipad violates numerous federal aviation regulations." "So you're threatening me now?" "I'm explaining reality. You have a career, a reputation, a future. Karen has made one mistake. Don't let your ego destroy both of your lives." Sarah stood up slowly, her coffee cup still untouched on the table. She made a choice, and now she gets to live with the consequences of that choice. "You don't understand. No, you don't understand." Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every word carried the weight of absolute conviction. "I've spent 12 years flying medical helicopters. I've carried dying children, grieving parents, broken families. I've seen what happens when seconds matter and someone's selfishness gets in the way. Your daughter sat in her car for 47 minutes while a 7-year-old boy was bleeding to death. She was told multiple times what was happening. She was shown videos of the child being loaded into my aircraft, and she still refused to move because her shopping was more important. Victoria's face had gone pale, but she pressed on. The charges stay. Your daughter is going to face the consequences of her actions. And if you think your money or your influence is going to change that, you're about to get a very expensive education in how the real world works. Sarah turned to leave, but Victoria's voice stopped her. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Captain Mitchell. My husband knows people, important people. We can make your life very difficult. Sarah turned back, and Victoria flinched at the expression on her face. Mrs. Whitmore, your daughter nearly killed a child today. If you think threatening me is going to make me back down, you're stupider than she is. She walked away, leaving Victoria sitting alone with her unopened envelope and her empty threats, but Sarah's day was far from over. 20 minutes later, she was in the hospital administrator's office, facing a very uncomfortable-looking Mr. Johnson, and a man she didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. Captain Mitchell Johnson said nervously, "This is Charles Whitmore, chairman of Whitmore Industries and member of our hospital board." Unlike his wife, he radiated a different kind of power quieter, more dangerous, the kind that came from owning rather than inheriting. Captain Mitchell, I understand we have a situation. Sarah didn't take his hand either. We have a situation where your daughter nearly killed a child, and now your family is trying to buy their way out of consequences. Charles's eyebrows rose, slightly straight to the point. I appreciate that. Yes, my daughter made a serious error in judgment today. Yes, my wife may have handled the initial response ... poorly, but I'm here to make things right by making the charges disappear, by ensuring that justice is served appropriately while minimizing unnecessary damage to everyone involved. Charles moved to the window, looking out at the helipad where Karen's Mercedes still sat, now surrounded by police tape. Captain Mitchell, you're a military veteran. Marines, I believe. You understand chain of command, appropriate response, measured consequences. I understand that your daughter put her convenience above a child's life, and she will face consequences for that. But destroying her future serves no purpose. She's 26 years old, she has a master's degree in business administration, she's never been in trouble before. One moment of poor judgment shouldn't define her entire life. Unlike his wife's crude attempts at bribery and threats, Charles was more sophisticated. He was trying to appeal to her sense of fairness, to make her feel like she was being unreasonable. She was told repeatedly what was happening. She chose not to care. She panicked. She made a mistake. She's young. She's 26, not 16, and she didn't panic. She calculated. She decided that her schedule was more important than a medical emergency. Charles turned from the window, his expression hardening slightly. Captain Mitchell, I'm going to be frank with you. My family has significant investments in this hospital and this city. We donate millions of dollars annually to various causes, including pediatric medicine. And sometimes the greater good requires us to take a broader view of justice. But sending her to prison serves no one. Sarah looked at Johnson, who was carefully studying his hands. The administrator was clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Johnson, Sarah said, are you going to let him dictate hospital policy? Johnson cleared his throat. Captain Mitchell, Mr. Whitmore is simply expressing his concerns about a difficult situation. He's asking you to ignore the fact that his daughter nearly killed a patient. We're discussing appropriate consequences. Karen will lose her job, obviously. She faced civil liability for the damage to the helipad and any delays in medical care. She'll make a substantial donation to the hospital's pediatric wing, and she performed community service related to emergency medical services. But no, criminal charges. Criminal charges that will destroy a young woman's future and serve no constructive purpose. Sarah shook her head. Mr. Whitmore, let me explain something to you. I've seen what happens when entitled people face consequences for their actions. The story broke at 11 o'clock that night, and by midnight, it had gone viral. Sarah watched from her apartment as her phone exploded with notifications. The video had been picked up by national networks within hours. #HelipadKaren was trending. On social media, the hospital's phone lines were jammed with reporters requesting interviews and citizens demanding justice. But the real earthquake began at 6 a.m. the next morning. Sarah's phone rang, the caller ID showing Metro General Hospital. "Captain Mitchell, this is Dr. Martinez. You need to get down here immediately." "What's wrong?" "Charles Whitmore just fired the entire hospital board and is demanding your immediate termination." "But that's not the worst part." Sarah sat up in bed, instantly alert. "What's the worst part?" Marcus Thompson took a turn for the worse during the night. Internal bleeding, complications from the surgery, and Karen Whitmore is here. "What do you mean she's here? She posted bail 2 hours ago. She's in the lobby right now, screaming at anyone who'll listen that this is all your fault. She's claiming that if you hadn't assaulted her car, none of this would have happened." Sarah was already reaching for her uniform. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Sarah, there's more." Channel 7 received a cease and desist order at 5 a.m., the Whitmores are claiming, defamation and demanding the story be retracted. "Called to warn you that they're coming after you next." By the time Sarah arrived at Metro General, the hospital was under siege. News vans lined the street, reporters thrust microphones at anyone entering or leaving the building, and a crowd of protesters had gathered on the sidewalk carrying signs reading, "Justice for Marcus" and "Money can't buy lives." Inside the lobby, Sarah found chaos. Karen Whitmore stood near the information desk, no longer the composed VIP coordinator from the day before. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her hair disheveled. She was gesticulating wildly at a group of reporters who had somehow gotten inside. "This whole thing is insane," Karen was saying. "I made one tiny mistake, and now my entire life is being destroyed. That pilot is the real criminal here. She could have killed someone with that stunt." Sarah approached quietly, but Karen spotted her immediately. "There she is." Karen pointed an accusatory finger, the vigilante pilot who thinks she's above the law. The reporters turned as one, cameras and microphones swinging toward Sarah. But before anyone could ask a question, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Karen Elizabeth Whitmore." Everyone turned to see Maria Thompson walking slowly across the lobby, her face pale but her eyes blazing with a fury that made the room fall silent. Behind her walked her husband David, a large man with calloused hands and the look of someone who worked for a living. "You want to talk about whose fault?" This is Maria's voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire lobby. "Let's talk about fault." Karen's bravado faltered. "I'm sorry about your son, but nothing." Maria stopped 3 feet from Karen, close enough that everyone could see the exhaustion and grief etched into her face. "My son is 7 years old. Yesterday morning, he was playing on the monkey bars at school. Last night, he was fighting for his life because you were too selfish to move your car. I didn't know you knew." David Thompson stepped up beside his wife, his voice like gravel. "We've seen the security footage. We've heard the radio calls. You knew exactly what was happening, and you chose your shopping over our son's life." Karen looked around desperately for support, but found none. Even the reporters were silent, recognizing they were witnessing something raw and real. "He's going to be okay," Karen said weakly. The doctors said he might not walk for 6 months because of the internal damage caused by the delay," Maria interrupted. 6 months of physical therapy, 6 months of pain, 6 months of wondering if he'll ever be the same. "Because you couldn't be bothered to move your car." Charles Whitmore chose that moment to make his entrance, flanked by 3 lawyers and a security team. He strode across the lobby like a man accustomed to command, but stopped short when he saw the crowd of cameras and the confrontation unfolding. "Karen, we're leaving now." "Mr. Whitmore," one of the reporters called out, "do you have any comment about your daughter's actions yesterday?" Charles ignored the question and moved toward Karen, but Maria Thompson stepped into his path. "Must be the father," she said, "the one who raised her to think other people's lives don't matter." Charles's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but upset?" David Thompson's voice rose. "Upset is when someone cuts you off in traffic. This is rage. This is watching your child suffer because some spoiled brat thinks the world revolves around her." "Now see here," Charles began, but he was interrupted by the arrival of another group, this one led by Dr. Martinez and Administrator Johnson. "Mr. Whitmore, there's nothing to discuss," Charles replied coldly. I want Captain Mitchell terminated immediately, and I want this hospital to issue a public statement distancing itself from her reckless actions. Sarah stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, your daughter's actions nearly killed a child. I'm not going to apologize for saving his life. You violated federal aviation regulations. You destroyed private property. I did my job. Sarah's voice cut through his bluster like a blade, something your daughter apparently never learned how to do. The lobby erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Karen began crying. Charles's lawyers huddled around him, whispering urgently. But through the chaos, a new voice emerged, calm, authoritative, and unexpected. If I may have everyone's attention, the crowd turned to see an elderly man in a wheelchair being pushed by a nurse. He was thin, pale, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Behind him walked a woman in an expensive suit, clearly a lawyer. "Who is that?" Sarah heard someone whisper. "Harold Brennan," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "former federal prosecutor. Lost his legs in Vietnam, dedicated his life to victims' rights, and according to the news, he's representing the Thompson family pro bono." Brennan raised his hand, and the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Harold Brennan. I represent the Thompson family in this matter. I've spent 40 years prosecuting cases where the wealthy and powerful believed they were above the law. Today, I'm here to ensure that justice is served." He looked directly at Charles Whitmore. "Mr. Whitmore, your daughter committed a crime. Not a mistake, not an error in judgment to crime. She deliberately obstructed emergency medical services, resulting in the endangerment of a child's life. In my 40 years of practice, I have never seen a more clear-cut case of reckless endangerment." "Now, see here," Charles started. "I'm not finished." Brennan's voice carried the authority of decades in courtrooms. "Your family's subsequent actions attempting to bribe Captain Mitchell, threatening her employment, pressuring hospital administration, and now trying to silence the media constitute additional crimes, including obstruction of justice and witness intimidation." Karen was openly sobbing now, the reality of her situation finally breaking through her entitled worldview. "Furthermore," Brennan continued, "I've reviewed the security footage, radio transcripts, and medical records. Your daughter was informed no fewer than 7 times about the medical emergency. She was shown video footage of the child being loaded into the aircraft. She was personally approached by hospital security, administration, and medical staff. Her response each time was to refuse and threaten legal action." The lawyer beside Brennan stepped forward. "We're filing charges for reckless endangerment, obstruction of emergency services, and criminal negligence. Additionally, we're pursuing federal charges for the family's attempts to interfere with a federal investigation." Charles's face had gone ashen. "This is ridiculous." "Karen made a mistake, Mr. Whitmore," Brennan interrupted. "In 40 years of prosecuting cases, I've learned to distinguish between mistakes and choices. Your daughter made a choice. She chose her convenience over a child's life. She chose her schedule over an emergency. She chose to refuse 7 direct requests to move her vehicle. Those weren't mistakes, they were conscious decisions that endangered a human being." He turned his wheelchair to face the cameras. "This case represents everything wrong with a system that allows wealth to shield people from consequences. But today, that system fails. Today, justice will be served regardless of how much money the Whitmore family has or how many people they think they can intimidate." Sarah watched as Charles Whitmore's world crumbled around him. The man who had walked into the lobby with supreme confidence now looked like what he really was, a father, realizing that his money and influence couldn't protect his daughter from the consequences of her actions. Karen had collapsed into a chair, her sobs echoing through the lobby. The weight of what she had done and what was about to happen to her had finally broken through her bubble of entitlement. "The district attorney has agreed to pursue the maximum penalty," Brennan continued. "Given the severity of the endangerment and the family's subsequent attempts to obstruct justice, we're looking at significant prison time." "Please." "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Maria stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head. "You're not S.